Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the STI Staccato XC. This time last year, we're in 2020 now, back in 2019 this time, I had not owned a 2011, and I had no plans to own a 2011. And then my mind got changed, probably because shooting other people's 2011s, I know I'd spent some trigger time on Nighthawks and STIs owned by guys like Steve Fisher, and a few of my students would come through classes with them. It got my interest. I, in the past, was a 1911 person way back in the day. We're talking almost 15 years ago now. I owned quite a few 1911s and even had to carry 1911 duty for a little while for SWAT purposes, which was a little strange because our duty gun wasn't a 1911. When it came for SWAT time, we had to switch guns, which was weird. But that's just how that particular department worked. What is the 2011? Well, it's a 1911 that holds more bullets, basically. It's a modernized, improved version, improved QC, improved parts. We've got over a century of lessons learned in this design. And while there is a very valid argument, depending on what your purpose is, to say, well, there's no real reason to use the 1911 or 2011 operating system in today's modern age when we have striker-fired internal hammer guns and all these other features in polymer guns, there is still some value to this particular design. One of the biggest things that you get from this is you have a really nicely heavy gun. Not necessarily overly heavy, but it is a heavy gun, which helps mitigate some of that felt recoil. And you've got a straight pull trigger, which a lot of shooters prefer. I can shoot a 2011 or a 1911 much faster than I can shoot a traditional striker-fired or single-action, double-action only gun. But I wouldn't call it a beginner's firearm. That manual safety can screw with people. The single action only can screw with people. I've seen newer shooters bring 1911s and 2011s to classes, and sometimes they forget to sweep that safety. Sometimes they forget that the hammer has to be cocked in order for the gun to fire, because it's single action only. The one thing that appealed to me when I got into red dots was putting a red dot on a 2011 or 1911. You can go so very deep in the slide in order to get that optic to sit really low, more in line with that natural presentation of my point of aim to acquire my dot, shoot my gun. If you remember from my Staccato P video that I did, one of my concerns, or I should say, I wouldn't even say criticisms, one of the things I didn't really care for was the fact that their optic mounting plate was very thick, very tall, which isn't a bad thing from a durability or rigidity standpoint, but it's not something I really cared for. On the new for 2020 line, the Staccato XC, which used to be the DVCP, has a thinner plate, which brings the optic a little bit lower. Now this thing, the STI's Staccato line is still default, the duo optic system is still default for the delta point, but you can also mount a Trijicon RMR or anything with an RMR footprint to it. And I'm sure, depending on the popularity of other optics out there, such as the Aimpoint Acro or the HoloSun 509T, someone's going to produce a plate to be able to mount those optics as well. Now, standard features on the Staccato XC Duo, which is the optics ready version, which is the one that I got because these days I don't buy a lot of irons only guns anymore. You're getting a 5-inch comp bull barrel. So it's a bull barrel, but it's also got an integral compensator which tracks within the dust cover. Makes for a very flat shooting gun, which we'll get into. It comes with 3 magazines, a Melanite mag, so it's got a 17 round and 2 20 round mags, which is, you know, perfect for duty setup or even concealed carry. If you already conceal carry a longer gun, a 5-inch gun like a Glock 34, this is going to weigh a little bit more, but it's going to give you the same overall length profile depending on carry position. Comes with Dawson precision sights, so you get Dawson rear, Dawson front, fiber optic front, which I like a lot. Some people don't like fibers on red dot guns. I don't really have an issue with it. I actually have Dawson sights on an M&P that has a red dot, and I have a red front fiber, which is the same color as my reticle, but I don't ever notice it unless I'm trying to use the iron sight, so it's not a big deal. One big concern that you do have with fiber optics is if you do run the gun hard and heavy, you're going to melt that front fiber, but they come with replacements. You can buy replacements pretty cheap, so it's not that big of a deal. And all things being considered, you're probably not going to get the gun that hot very often, so it's a minor inconvenience you're going to have to contend with. But the trade-off is you have a much more crisp, clean, and visible front sight post in the event that you are going to use your iron sights. As a DLC coating, which I appreciate a lot because I am a little rough on my guns, so DLC I found holds up really, really well to just general use holster wear and then intermediate or inadvertent contact with foreign objects such as barricades for training and metal and wood and all those things like that. It's got their 2011 G2 full-length black grip with the Tactical Advantage magwell, and the frame itself is billet steel. So you're getting a very solid, very robust built gun, at least on initial purchase. And when you think about the overall price, like, is the gun going to perform like I want it to perform? Well, the first thing I did once I got the optics zeroed on the Staccato XC Duo is my 500 round Burndown. One thing that has been true of certain 1911s and 2011 or double stack 9mm or double stack 45 or double stack 40 1911 profile guns in the past is when you get them hot, do they start to encounter performance issues? So 500 rounds, do 500 rounds as quickly as possible. Usually takes me with a handgun between 4.5 and 5 minutes. That's a lot of ammunition for that short period of time. So problems that you wouldn't necessarily notice shooting 500 rounds over the period of 8 hours may become readily apparent if you shoot them in 4 minutes. So here's your Burndown. No function issues whatsoever during the Burndown. I fired 147 grain Phoenix, I fired 115 grain, 124 grain, and 124 grain plus P gold dot, and I didn't experience any function issues whatsoever. But there is a small asterisk, a caveat, if you will. One thing I noticed on the Burndown, because this was basically right after zeroing my first 500 rounds with the gun, is loading a full magazine in and hitting the slide release. The slide is a little anemic to come forward because of the spring weight that's standard. Not something I care for. I like my slide to go forward with emphasis and with enthusiasm, and that wasn't something I was getting. So sometimes the magazine would insert and I hit the slide release and the slide would just kind of hesitate and then it would go forward. It would still go forward, but it would go forward like it was, you know, waiting on the bus for the first day of school, didn't really want to go. So not a big fan of that. I'm definitely, you know, after this 2,000 round review process, going to throw a heavier spring in that. It didn't ever create, that I can remember during the 2,000 round review process, an actual functionality issue, but it's just something that I noticed, something I didn't care for. During the 2,000 round review process, I had exactly one malfunction. I had one stovepipe shooting 115. Why do I shoot 115 through a comp gun? Because people are going to shoot 115 through a comped gun. 115 is probably the most common range ammunition you see for people who shoot 9mm. So I want to know if it's going to run 115, even though 115 generally agreed upon doesn't have the horsepower, if you will, to activate and get the value out of a compensator. So it does run 115, really great, asterisk, one single round. And again, this is a sample size of 1. Mostly shot that 147 grain from Phoenix, but I shot a lot of 124 gold dot and 124 plus P over the 2,000 round review process. And I was very pleased with the overall performance of the gun. The compensator compensates. Now the weight of the gun also helps with that. So I'm getting the best of both worlds. I'm getting a heavy but not too heavy gun, but I'm also getting a compensator, basically sight tracking compensator, if you will, on a 5-inch bull barrel. It gives me a whole lot of balance and a whole lot of recoil, felt recoil mitigation. Two things carrying over from the Staccato P that I experienced with my Staccato P to the Staccato XC is the Ambi Safety. I've had 1911s in the past where, because I'm primarily a left-handed shooter, that addition of a thumb paddle for a left-handed shooter was more of an afterthought. And it was installed in such a way that there was a binding issue, or there wasn't as much leverage, if you will, because I had a connector rod and then just a little aftermarket little piece on there, and the fitment wasn't great, or it was an aftermarket part from 2 different manufacturers. I remember I had a Para-Ordnance LDA LTC that had an Ambi Safety that didn't really work as well as it should have, and that gun definitely needed it. So I ended up getting rid of the gun for that very reason, and I was, you know, ethical enough to sell it to a right-handed shooter who wouldn't have the same problems that I had. But with STI, I don't have that problem at all. Clearing the safety with my left hand is just as smooth and efficient as clearing the safety with my right hand when I shoot it right-handed. Very happy about that. I also like the magazine release. It's a very simple cylindrical design, not a lot of pomp or circumstance to it. It doesn't have any aggressive checkering patterns or stipple or anything like that. It's just a post. It's a big post. It's hard to miss. It's right there. It's easy to push directly in on. Magazine's going to drop free. Reloading the gun, like I said, go back to that spring issue. Spring issue aside, not necessarily an issue for everybody, was an issue for me. Insertion with that magwell is really easy. You just have to get it in the same street and it's going to go right to the address. I like the magwell a lot. Not so much for concealed carry. That's a concern that I'm going to have for concealed carry. It's also a concern you could possibly have for clearing malfunctions. But me, it's more of a duty-focused gun. That's how I would think of it. So I'm going to run those 20-round magazines. As every magazine I'm going to put in the gun, if I have the choice, is going to be a 20-rounder. So I've got a lot of runway on that for stripping magazines if I have to for malfunctions or whatever. But during the 2,000-round review process, I only had one malfunction, which is a stovepipe. And under a normal clearance procedure, I wouldn't have had to mess with that magazine at all. So the magwell is definitely a great addition to this gun. It allows you to run it nice and fast, get your reloads down really quickly. What kind of accuracy are you buying? That's a very important question, because if I'm going to spend that much money on a handgun, it should be really accurate. I didn't expect to have any accuracy issues carrying over from the Staccato P. I expected the Staccato XC to be just as accurate, if not more accurate, if that's possible. Doing 5-round groups at 25 yards using a 1 MOA RMR, I shot some range ammo. I shot some 147 grain Phoenix, and then I shot 124 grain Gold Dot. So here are those 2 groups at 25 yards. It's hard to be critical of that kind of accuracy. It was fired bench rest, didn't do it standing. I like to remove as much of the human element as possible so we can see what the gun is capable of without as much involvement from the shooter. I don't like to barricade it in or try to ransom rest it, but I do shoot off a bag just to give me those 5-round groups at 25 yards. And I'm very happy with the overall performance. Just during the review process, shooting the gun for accuracy's sake, the rounds weren't where I wanted them to go, and they went there quickly because the gun handles recoil so very well. I don't have as much exaggerated dot movement, and that's one great thing about red dots is they really show you how much movement is in the gun based on the behavior of the red dot. I've fired some smaller, like compact lathe guns with RMRs on them, and that dot leaves the window every single time, no matter how efficient my grip is. On the XC, my dot's raising to just probably 1/3 before it hits the top of the window on like 147. On 124 plus P, it goes up a little bit higher, but that compensator and then the weight of the gun really helps that felt recoil, helps with that muzzle rise. You're never going to get completely rid of muzzle rise, but this gun gives it a really good try and has a very positive approach to removing that recoil. The compensator performed great. 2 questions about compensator that come up from certain people is, well, you can't shoot under low light. The hell you can't. And of course, an even smaller community is like, well, you shouldn't shoot comped guns under night vision. Again, the hell you can't. Low light with weapon light, and of course with night vision, compensator, the muzzle flash moves at the speed of light. So by the time the muzzle flash is over, you're just now getting your sight picture back. You're ready to fire your next round down range. And if you're running a weapon mounted light or even a handheld light, muzzle flash isn't an issue anyway. Under night vision, not really a big deal, same deal. Yeah, your night vision does magnify light, so it is a little bit more noticeable for obvious reasons, but it didn't keep me from being able to hit what I was trying to hit, the distances I was trying to hit it from. Didn't have any loss of accuracy, loss of ability to pick up my target, acquire my target, shoot. So should be no concerns. I'd like to put that myth to bed, although it still persists. The fact that you can't or shouldn't shoot comp guns in low light or under night vision, because both are completely false statements and usually based on ignorance of shooting comp guns in low light and night vision. Overall features and performance, I don't want to use the term, but the quote-unquote fit and finish. The QC tolerances from STI are just amazing. Everything works like a well-oiled machine, even when it doesn't have a lot of oil left in it, because you put 2,000 rounds through it. I was very pleased with the performance of the gun from first to last round. Even that spring issue, it's a small issue, something I'm going to correct now that I've got my 2,000 rounds out of the way. And of course, 2,000 rounds is a good time to change your springs anyway, although some guns say you can go a little bit longer than that. As heavy as this slide is, comparatively, relatively speaking, I'm definitely going to do a spring change anyway. It shoots the ammo you're going to put in it, and it shoots it well, and it shoots it accurate. And that's the most we can ask for. Now, is the gun worth the money? If you're Glock-centric, or you're M&P-centric, or you're FN-centric, and you're not really into 1911s or double-stack 1911s, the answer is probably no. If you are double-stack 9mm curious, and you want to buy one gun, then the answer is yes. And if that gun has to have a compensator and has to have an optic, the answer is also yes. You're getting a great amount of performance, but you are going to have to pay for it, and there, no free things, and some things are just going to cost more, and that's unfortunate, but I don't regret purchasing this gun at all. I'm very happy with its overall performance. I'm very happy that it can fill a lot of different roles. If you think about it as a firearm and not just as an expensive handgun, because people spend this much money on a rifle and not bat an eye, but when they look at a handgun, they kind of get weird about it. I bought it, and I think that you wouldn't go wrong if you were interested, and it's something that you have to have. You should buy it too, because as far as integrally comped double stack 1911, 2011 style guns, it's one of the best ones out there, if not the best one out there. I'm very, very pleased with its performance overall, and it's something I recommend anybody who is interested in it. I'm Eric Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.